Washington football. Woo! Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Burgundy Zone. I am your host, Kyle. I'm not sure if I'll be joined by any co-hosts for this episode, but it's midday. Happy Halloween to all who celebrates. We are going to break down the matchup, the Sunday Night Football matchup against Seattle. So the title of tonight's episode is The Stars and Stripes, meaning basically double entendre there, with the stripes being now on the helmets and the throwback Super Bowl classic jerseys being worn on Sunday night. And be able to break down this game with us is our good friend of this show, Mr. Mitch Tischler. Thank you so much for joining me on this Friday, sir. How you doing?
Happy to join you. I'm excited about these helmets and these jerseys. The team can make them the full-time jerseys quick enough because they're pretty damn cool.
Absolutely. Like, I want to ask your opinion. It's like a part of me almost feels like I shouldn't be hyped about the stripes because like it's something we've seen for my whole life, right? And then just for the past couple of years, it got changed, and then they're changing it back. But it's almost like it's weird for me because it's like you've seen it before, but it just has a different look to it, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, listen, the jerseys they wear now are abjectly awful, and I think everyone agrees with it. You know, aside from not being true burgundy and gold, which is the biggest issue with them, it's tough to read the numbers on them, and I don't like them very much. And I think that, this year you have the whites as the throwback, and next year those will be the full-time homes, and then the burgundies will be the throwbacks next year, and in 2 years those will take over, and we'll be back to hopefully traditional burgundy and gold jerseys. But the three stripes on the helmet too, I think look great. I know, folks don't love the W on the side, but I've seen the helmets in person in the locker room this week. I thought they looked great.
Yeah, absolutely. They're absolutely beautiful, man. I was battling with that myself. Like, why am I getting hyped over this? I've seen this so many times, but it's just different. It's just different. Almost like the Halo remake of the original campaign. So I played it so many times. I should get hyped over, but it's redone. I have to get hyped over it. But speaking of bringing stuff back, Mitch, it looks like Jayden, Dan Quinn just said in his press conference that Jayden is playing in this game. Does that move the needle for you enough in this game to be able to think Washington has a legitimate chance to win?
Absolutely. Anytime Jayden's on the field, I think this team has a chance to win. And you look at the way that this team was built. The defense was never going to be good enough to go out and start winning games on their own. It was built on the fact that you have a superstar quarterback, you have an offense that's going to be able to move the football, and the defense is going to bend don't break just enough to allow you to win games. And obviously that plan hasn't happened yet this season, really. Maybe we'll talk about the game in LA against the Chargers, but essentially, that the thought preseason hasn't really, made it to the regular season. And I look at last week's game against the Chiefs, and maybe it's with burgundy colored glasses, but I think if Jayden Daniels plays that game, I'm not saying they necessarily win, but they're in a position to win a football game there. I think the offense gets a couple more points in the first half. The biggest issue with this team is they've been unable to play from ahead all year long. And when you can't play from ahead, that causes the defense to have to react, accordingly. You can't get into your offensive rhythm as much. And, that first drive against the Chiefs was really good, minus the ball off Debo's face mask that turned it over. So I think with Jayden back, kind of anything's possible. Obviously, I'd love to have Terry with him. That changes things, a fair amount, but it is what it is, and we'll have to go forward with it from here.
Yeah, and to your point, I saw a point differential for every NFL team. Washington, the first quarter point differential, the third worst in the NFL with a negative 31. Just speaking to the pregame game plan, they know exactly what we're doing, what we're in, and what we want to do, it seems like, in every game. And they have to start playing up in the beginning of these games so they could actually be able to sustainably run the football. That seems to be the point for Washington in these losses, is that they can't have the quarterback then leading rushing every single game. At some point, your running game's got to get back going, right?
And to highlight that point, early in games, the NFL average is almost 5.5 yards per play on their first drive. The Commanders are last in the NFL with 3.1 yards per play on their first drive. That's that 2 yards per play is a pretty big delta when you look at something as small as, that first drive. And I do think they want to get the run game going. I think when you look at, the stats on paper, it looks like the Commanders want to run the ball, but that's really buoyed by 3 games where they went for 200 plus yards.
Right.
The last couple of weeks have been meager to say the least. And, 2 of those 3 were against defenses that really struggled against the run.
Yep.
So I think to come into this game against the Seahawks, who have, depending on what metric you want to use, the best rush defense in the NFL, and expect that all of a sudden they're going to explode out and, run for $150 or be able to move the ball consistently on the ground, I think is probably, a little bit overstated. So you're going to need Jayden to use his legs. You're going to need, these receivers to get open, and not just get open, but catch footballs. We've seen a lot more drops this year than we saw last year. And that, part of that is the receiving, the injuries at the receiver position. But I wouldn't be surprised if Jayden leads. I'd not even be surprised. I expect Jayden to lead this team in rushing on Sunday. And it's going to be, how much he's able to get the ball moving through the air that's really going to buoy this offense.
Yeah, and I know Seattle's offense, Jackson, Smith, and Jigba obviously deserves a lot of credit for his season so far. They've gotten a lot of the spotlight. But defensively, like I do metrics and planning this out for every episode, and I write down there's 6 metrics for each side of the football. And on offense, they're tied at 3 each in being better statistically, right? On defense, Seattle just dominates it, every single category. They're number 1 in rushing yards allowed, and they're also tied for 3rd in sacks per game. So kind of speaking to your point where running the ball might not be the right emphasis going into this game, but then you're almost worried about putting Jayden in harm's way, given that they are very good at getting out to the pass with Leonard Williams and those outside rushers. But with that being said, we got to look at the O-line a little bit, Mitch. Or how concerned are you if Laramie Tunsil's not able to play in this game? And how would you be plugging these offensive linemen in to kind of help with Laramie not being there if he wasn't?
I would start off with the Seattle defense is, like you said, I think vastly underrated. I don't think folks really recognize how good they are. That being said, the Commanders' offensive line played really well last week against the Chiefs. It was unfortunate that in a major moment there was a huge breakdown, but Mariota had a nice pocket most of that game, and even Mariota kind of escaped from some nice pockets and ran himself into a little bit of pressure. I don't know that the Seahawks front 4 are demonstrably better than the Chiefs front 4. And so I look at, the totality of the defense, and Steve Spagnuolo in Kansas City loves to get creative defensively. Mike McDaniel is very similar with Seattle. So I think having these 2 games back to back are kind of nice because, you already had a situation where you played a defensive front and a defense that's coming at you a lot of different ways. And now you get to, settle in week 2 against a defense that likes to do not the same set of rushes, but likes to come at you in different ways. And I think having that 1 week of experience will help a fair amount. I thought Brandon Coleman played well when he stepped in at left tackle.
He did.
I've had some angst about the tackle situation, at least kind of the higher level plan. I think this is after last season, I was higher on Brandon Coleman than I think most folks were. And clearly the front office went out and got 2 tackles. So that tells you, what they thought of him. I thought he played well last year, and certainly it was up and down, but it's also his rookie year in the NFL. He was a 3rd-year pick. Like, you saw some really good play out of him. You also saw some bad play. But I would have been comfortable coming into this season with him still outside. Now, that being said, Laramie Tunsil, blows that away. He's an all-pro. He's a difference maker. I think we've seen that, a fair amount this season. Josh Connolly's been, he's been good. I think, he gets pointed out when he makes mistakes because people want him to be, this Laramie Tunsil type player already. He was moving positions, which is obviously always tough. Early in the season, he had those 3 straight games to start against the elite of elite pass rushers, and he struggled a little bit there. But you saw him get settled in here in the middle of the season, and he's been largely good, and particularly in the run game. I think they'll put some weight and strength on him over the offseason. He'll get a little bit better, being able to anchor in pass pro. But I've been really, really impressed with his O-line, considering all the changes that have been happening around them, that they've been able to be, pretty solid as a group together. And I think with Jayden there, who's going to be a little bit more comfortable sitting in the pocket, is a little bit better, reading defenses. I think that he should have, plenty of time to throw the football. It's just, it seems like each week, each game that they lose, there's one or two big plays where there's whether it's a communication or a mental breakdown somewhere along the way, and it blows them up. And that happened on Monday night against the Chiefs. I don't know that anyone was stopping Mahomes in the second half there anyway, but they had an opportunity to get a big 3rd and 1 and took the big sack. But I've been good with this O-line, and I think they've done a really nice job.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's just crazy that the offense almost takes a step back in a way with the added of the tackles, right? But maybe there's a comfortability aspect with Jayden and Cliff where if Laramie doesn't go and they have to use those chips on the outside for the tackles in this game, maybe it gets them back in that comfortability from where they were last season, being able to get things going. Because right now, Washington coming to this game, they're 24th in passing yards per game, obviously tied for 3rd in rushing yards, but that's based on a couple games, and the last 3 games has not really panned out in that way. Now, defensive.
Real quick, just want to push back a little bit on the offensive line taking a step back, and certainly
not the offensive line, just the offense in general.
Yeah. A lot of that happened. When you lose your top 3 receivers, the 2 games that you were against the Cowboys and the Bears, where Debo was clearly limited against the Bears.
Yep.
Teams are stacking the box, and it's more on the lack of an outside threat, and that comes from I would say kind of a little bit of lack of planning on the Commanders' front office behalf in the wide receiver room, but we don't have to necessarily go down that.
I would agree.
road. But I just think when you look at some of the rushing numbers and some of the passing numbers, and if you want to start digging into pass rush rate or pressure rates and stuff like that, you got to remember there's 5 guys or 6 guys up front, and you're blocking sometimes nine rushers, and no team is going to be successful in that route. So I think getting it feels like Debo's back to healthy, getting him back on the field and being a real part of this offense, I think should alleviate that a little bit. And, hopefully we can continue to see Luke and Jalen Lane, improve and prove to be threats on the outside.
Yeah, and I think Jalen got a lot of crap for the last game where that was a tough catch to make, but if it hits your hands, you got to catch it. Obviously, the kick return is inexcusable. You got to be able to haul that thing in there, man. But to kind of talk about defense, we saw Jordan McGee last week, and he was electrifying. He came in and made a lot of plays along with Tyler Owens. Even though they lost the game, do you think that's a good step in the right direction for this defense and being able to get their bearings about them again?
Yes, I think part of it is all the injuries on the defensive line.
Yeah.
Frankie Louvu essentially played defensive end that entire game /spy, which allowed McGee to get on the field. I have been a big Jordan McGee guy since last year's training camp. Obviously, the injury then kind of hurt him, but all offseason I was talking about him being kind of a breakout player on this defense. And quite frankly, I look at him as a potential replacement to Bobby Wagner next season.
I agree.
We got to see him get on the field more and continue to improve. But what I like about, some of these guys, Tyler Owens and Jordan McGee, is they're playing fast, they're playing hard. They might be playing with their like chickens with their heads cut off, but they're at least out there, running around making plays, because you can talk about the defense, the first 5-6 weeks of the season, and the veterans might know where they're supposed to be, but it wasn't making a difference because teams were scoring at will on them. So if you bring in someone who might be a little unsure of what's going to happen, I think you'll see a couple of those big plays. I think the Rashee Rice touchdown where he crossed the middle, I think folks were hard on Bobby Wagner on that play. I think Tyler Owens did a poor job specifically on that play of rerouting him. But you're going to give up some big plays, but you'll also make some big plays. And we saw them get 2 turnovers. Not that either of those 2 guys were necessarily involved in those plays, but what the plan wasn't working, and you got to start making adjustments and trying to figure it out. And I think Jacob Martin played an unbelievable game.
Yep.
I think his enthusiasm and excitement being out there kind of permeated the group. Deron Payne and John Kinlaw are going to be big parts this week again, like they always are. It's funny though, Sam Darnold doesn't run much, but the Seahawks have the #1 passer rating when their quarterback escapes the pocket, which is kind of a crazy number when you think about Darnold and his slow steps getting outside the pocket. But this is a quarterback that these guys should be able to get after a little bit. I expect we're going to see pretty fired up Bobby Wagner out there playing the Seahawks. He can say that it doesn't mean anything, but it'll be seeing those familiar jerseys across the way for him. I think this defense has a chance this week.
Yeah, me too. Coming into this game, Seattle, they're fourth in sacks per game on offense, only giving up on average 1.3 per game, where Washington is tied for 19th and giving up on average 2.5 per game. Now, that being said, the trade deadline is coming up, Mitch, and it's a question for Washington fans. Do you think that this is a selling type of point for Washington? Are you going to wait a couple games to be able to kind of decide on where they stand, or do you think this is a buy kind of situation? Would you stay put?
I think what happened Sunday night is the determining factor. If you go out and lose to Seattle, I think it changes kind of the trajectory of the season. I was saying on our Beltway Football podcast and others, like, we've seen Washington teams feel like they're down and out and go run off 6-7 games in a row and make the playoffs. It might not be exactly how any of us envisioned this season to go, but there also has very rarely been a quarterback of Jayden Daniels' talent and quality here in Washington. And as we all know, you can ride that lightning in the NFL, and that can turn around a season like that. And we're now, 5-6 weeks from Jayden's knee injury. I think the hamstring injury clearly was a cautious sit out last week against the Chiefs. I think he's going to be 100% on Sunday night, and you'll get a real feel for where this team can go. And quite frankly, I think that should be the determining factor. But I don't know this team has a whole lot to trade away. There's not a lot of draft picks. There's not a lot of players that have long-term value. So it might be a pretty quiet trade deadline, which I'm sure all the folks that are angry with Adam Peters will just continue to get angrier with him, whether they trade or don't, whether they buy or sell or stay pat. I'm sure folks will find a way to be mad.
My man. There always is, man. There's always somebody. Going against Seattle, what is one key matchup that I'm not going to say that you're going to pay extra attention to? It's kind of hard to do that during games, but one that you're kind of intrigued by.
It's going to be Jackson Smith and Jigba, which obviously everyone's going to be watching, but particularly when he's in the slot. He's a guy that lines up, outside and in the slot kind of intermittently. He gobbles up, I think, 20% of the pass targets from Darnold, and he's a guy that finds a way to get open even when teams know that they're going to throw at him. Mikey Sanders still has, I think, gradually gotten better this season. I thought his best game was against the Chiefs. He had one kind of breakdown there, but when when a star receiver lines up in the slot, it makes it a lot tougher to double him, particularly with the middle of the field zone defense issues that the Commanders have had.
You're absolutely right.
There's going to be a lot of pressure on Sanders still to be really good on him in that slot. When he lines up on the outside, whether it's against Amos or against Lattimore, you can always shade safeties over the top, which makes it a little easier to kind of bracket and double and limit what he can do. But when they get him, in motion, getting into the slot, and the teams are making the defense is making the pass off, I think that's where I'm going to be watching most, because if Mikey doesn't have a good game, we could see JSN go for some real big numbers in the middle of the field there.
Yeah, and we've seen him step up against bigger wide receivers in the past, especially last season. Obviously, he was on the outside there, but Mikey does not seem to be the type that is scared of the competition or the difficulty of it. I think that's somebody who would step up for it. And overall, as a defense, they absolutely need to. But to wrap this up, Mitch, I only have a couple more questions for you. But overall, as a team, what are the keys for Washington this game? We kind of talked about defensively for Seattle, how they really are, like, they have a lot of top 10 categories in every one except for one in passing yards, where they're 23rd allowed, first in rushing yards, 7th in points per game allowed, tied for 4th in red zone conversion percentage. They are 7th in third down percentage, and obviously they're tied for 3rd in sacks per game defensively. So what would be your three keys for Washington to be able to win this football game?
I mean, truthfully, number 1, 2, and 3 is Jayden Daniels being dynamic. Not just being a good quarterback. We got to see the guy that, we saw leading this team through the playoffs last year, because for all intents and purposes, this is almost a playoff game. I think the atmosphere at Northwest is going to be awesome. I think fans are the jerseys. I think Sunday night, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement there. Art Monk going in, but I need Jayden to step out of the phone booth, twirl around with a cape on and be ready to go out there. Defensively, I think it's going to be slowing down the run early in the game. Losing all these defensive ends has been tough, and when Frankie Louvu's one of your defensive ends, he's not the stoutest guy in the run game with his hand in the dirt because he's just not a big enough body, and so teams will potentially start picking up on that and be able to run at him and get some success. So I think as much as you can try and make this Seahawks team one-dimensional and treat Jackson Smith and Jigba almost like we've seen the Commanders treat Malik Neighbors in the past, where he's kind of your only real threat. Let him get 10 catches for 75 yards, but don't let him get 4 catches for $140 and 2 touchdowns. Again, going back to that bend don't break, make him kick field goals, and hope that the offense is able to get itself in motion and score some touchdowns, get ahead, let this defense pin its ears back, because we haven't seen Von Miller pin his ears back yet this season. This team hasn't really gotten ahead enough where you've gotten to see some of these guys who were brought in to get after the quarterback because they always have to worry about the run because the game is close or they're down. So I think it's limiting the run early, Jayden being a star, and then getting after Darnold.
Yeah, I wanted to get your opinion on this, Mitch, because obviously that point differential early on has put them in a hole. And as somebody that loves the game of football, I'm struggling to be able to figure out, is that a coaching game plan thing, or is that a player not being ready, not being up for the game early on? Like, where do you put that? Because some of the blame, I believe, does need to be put on Joe Witten, the kind of game plan, but also in the same breath, he's trying to simplify things in order for things not to be so confusing and let up those big plays. So, like, where do you ultimately kind of push your chips in here?
Well, so the simplifying thing didn't really happen until last week.
Right.
I think it's tough as a coach because you spend the entire offseason game planning, putting together how you want to run your defense, how you envision everything working. And when it doesn't work early, at what point do you make that change, right? Is it 3 games in, it's not working? Oh shit, we have to change everything? Or, is it gradual? And so clearly there was a disconnect between the coaching, the style of coaching or the coaching points and the play on the field. And even against the Chiefs, we saw it where, guys went in motion, and as the ball's being snapped, you have DBs and secondary folks looking at each other, pointing around. And that just can't happen. It certainly can't happen in week 8. It can't happen in week 9. It's way too late in the season for this to be happening. And, I'm not giving Joe Witt a pass by any means, but I do think that, if you crumple up all the work you did in the offseason in weeks 3 or 4 to change things, then it takes another couple of weeks to implement it, and all of a sudden you're chasing your tail. So I do like that he pared some stuff back. I like that he made a couple changes. Hopefully, this matriculation continues to happen on defense, and you see guys get more comfortable with the condensed playbook, if you will.
Right.
And obviously, the injuries and all that stuff play into it, and the offense not being what they thought. Because again, you go back to before the season, no one thought this was the 85 Bears, but you just wanted to be just good enough to let Jayden do his thing on the offensive side. And they haven't been able to play from ahead at all. They haven't been able to settle in and get super creative because they're always back on their heels. Hopefully that they're able to kind of work their way into that sometime soon and start playing some of the type of defense that you hope to see. I will say real quick, just before, Trey Amos has been just an absolute stud. Yeah. And part of it is that folks aren't throwing at him as much because of Lattimore on the other side. But I'm almost at a point where I would just put Amos on Jackson Smith and Jigba, let him travel all over the field. I know that makes things difficult when you start talking about dropping in his zone versus man and whatnot, but he's a guy that's proven a lot, and I'm ready to start putting more and more on his plate. And let's see, is this a guy who can be in the same atmosphere as some of the top corners in the league?
Yeah. And well, basically it entails that if you are going to travel even in zone, it means that everyone has to know what their responsibilities are, regardless of where they are. And you would think by week 9, if you're simplifying things, they'd have a very good idea on where to be. These are grown men at this point, and hopefully they'd be able to do that. Now, going against Seattle, second to last one that I have for you. Who would you say deserves more snaps? I know a lot of people will point to Jordan McGee or they'll point to Tyler Owens, but who's somebody? Because in my personal opinion, like some of these undercover heroes, like Luke McCaffrey with that toe tapper last week, and Jeremy McNichols being explosive and being a big contributor for this offense when they really needed it, when things were stagnant. Who would you say needs a little bit more snaps in this game?
Um, that's part of the problem when you talk about all the changes that that
Right.
they made on defense. I don't know that there's a whole lot of folks that really deserve a lot more snaps.
Mm,
I'd like to see them work in Chris Rodriguez in short yardage a little bit more. I like the role kind of McNichols has settled into. Luke McCaffrey. So I think if you look at this offense with Terry, with Debo, with Noah Brown, and Jalen Lane is your kind of fourth. I'm sorry, Luke McCaffrey is your kind of fourth wide receiver. I think you can see him, be successful, and we saw it against KC. I think the 2-3 catches that he had there were very nice. But we've seen when he steps in and plays as a number one or number two receiver, it just doesn't get it done. Whether it's the
mm,
quarterback doesn't find him or he doesn't get open. And as the 100th pick in the draft, if his role on this team ends up being a great kick returner, because he is a great kick returner,
he is.
and you're kind of fourth receiver on your team, I think that's a reasonable expectation for him. I was very frustrated and upset after that Cowboys game that you have no receivers on the field and Luke McCaffrey gets two targets. That feels to me, impossible. And he and Jalen Lane both, obviously there's trust with the coaching staff and all that kind of stuff. You'd like to see them both develop a little bit quicker. I'd like to see them, on the field a little bit more. Jalen Lane ran a lot of those kind of shuttle screens at Virginia Tech. As we've seen it now in the pros, it hasn't been quite as successful. We know Jalen Lane's 40 speed, in underwear at the combine. I want to see him start running some deep routes. I want to see, how does he track the ball deep? Can he use his body to make those catches? Is he a deep threat that this offense can have? Because without Terry, there are no deep threats on this team. And Luke has made some big catches when Terry's been out, but you need someone who can consistently threaten another defense downfield. Otherwise, you let everyone press all the way up to the box, and that creates issues across the board.
Yeah, we kind of saw a glimpse of that against the Bears when Jalen Lane gave that stutter step on Tyreek Stevenson, nearly getting the touchdown. I think he was down at the 1 or 2 on that play. We ended up getting a touchdown on the drive, but just a small sample size of Jalen Lane contributing deep downfield, right? Last one I have for you. One area, I'm sure you've already highlighted it, but one area that Washington has to dominate in order for them to be able to win this football game.
O-line.
O-line.
I think if I don't necessarily expect they're going to open huge holes, but if you can get 4 yards instead of 0 or 1, I think if you keep yourself in reasonable down and distance, this is a gettable Seahawks defense. The creativity, the Mike McDonald, blitz packaging comes usually on third down, obvious pass situations. I think if they can keep them out of those situations and the O-line can get them to second and 7, third and 4, where you can be a little multiple, where you can run some of the, RPO stuff. You can run some of the, smoke and mirrors stuff with Debo, crossing coming across in jet motion. I think you can keep this Seahawks defense just enough off balance. And if you're able to, stay in these reasonable down distances, you also control the clock. You can keep the ball on your side. I think, the Seahawks are really good at playing on the East Coast under McDaniel. They don't come over here and lose.
Yeah.
But I do think that if you can control the clock, stay in reasonable down distance, don't let that Seattle defense start imposing its will on the Commanders' offense, they have a chance to go out there and win.
Real quick, you being an offensive line guy, myself included, the shot, some of the fan base has an issue with how many times they're in shotgun or the pistol. Are you type that wants to see more under center work, or how do you feel?
On fourth and short with Marcus Mariota, I would like to see them under center. He's a big enough body. he's a big enough body that you can, if you don't want to call it tush push, QB sneak, whatever the heck you want to call it, and you can be successful. With Jayden, everyone's going to look at the wet ball, the shotgun or pistol snap, on the fumble. That's where he is all the time. That's where Jayden's comfortable. He hasn't been under the center very often. Could they work some more of that in? Sure. I don't think the fourth and short. I want to see them under center. We saw last year Zach Ertz come across and take a quarterback sneak type play. I wouldn't hate to see something along those lines. If you have to bring in Mariota on a 4th and 1, do that. On the 4th and short, I want to see you under center. The rest of the game, whatever the most comfortable thing for the quarterback is, I think that the offensive line timing with the quarterback and pistol and the run is perfectly fine, and I don't think the under center fixes that.
I agree with you. Thank you, Mitch. I appreciate you and your time, as always. If you'd like to plug your social media handle and your show, just in case, brother.
Yeah, follow me at Mitch_Tischler, both Instagram and Twitter. Beltway Football, anywhere you get your good podcasts, on YouTube after games. And if you find yourself in Madrid, we're gonna have a little bit of fun on Friday night out there. So we'll have details for that on our socials and on our shows and stuff. But looking forward to hopefully a good last 2 home games here before we head out to Spain. But should be fun on Sunday night.
You just don't get lost on your way home Friday night over there in Spain.
I make no promises.
Out of the norm, you know what I mean? All right, Mitch. Have a good Friday. Happy Halloween, brother. Enjoy it.
You too. Thank you.
All right, everybody. We just spoke with the man, Mr. Mitch Tischler. Always appreciate his time and efforts of being able to come on here and give his thoughts on Washington. To wrap up this episode, we're going to answer some fan questions. This first one submitted by the Colonel. And, of course, I just want to say, if you guys have any questions, you have any statements, I would just write them into the YouTube comments, and I would love to be able to say them for you here, give you a shout-out. But this first question from the Colonel, we already know Seattle's going to score a lot of points on Sunday. Are we just going to rely on winning this shootout, or does defensive coordinator Joe Witt have a plan to stop Darnold and Smith and Jigba? See, that's the hard part with Jackson Smith and Jigba, because it's easier said than done with regardless of any plan, right? The old quote from Mike Tyson, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the mouth. And ultimately, the plan, it seems like every week, Colonel, that the plan coming in, something gets muddied. Like something goes wrong in that plan, which blows everything up. Because defensively, it's everyone being in the right position, everyone knowing what they have to do. And that kind of is the strangulation of the offense, so to speak, of being able to limit those big plays. But it seems like they've been having these mental hiccups every week, and so it's hard to say that any plan that you have against Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be good. Because Seattle coming into this game, being tied for 4th in sacks allowed, it's hard to get after Sam Darnold. He gets the ball out of his hands. He sits in the pocket. They block very well, and he has talented playmakers on the outside. Now, can your corners be able to delay routes enough for Jackson Smith and Jigba to screw up that timing? Or do we have the horses to be able to do that? And I think we do, but ultimately it comes down to the play call that's provided and if everyone is on the same page. Because I think, like Mitch kind of expertly said, it's kind of easier to bracket Jackson Smith and Jigba when he's on the outside than it is in the slot. But then you can make the argument that that's where like somebody like Jordan McGee or Tyler Owens comes into play in that kind of middle of the field if you are in that kind of zone. You can do some doubling there. It's just you got to get creative with it. But ultimately, I don't think it's going to be based on a shootout. I think, if anything, you want to force Seattle to play your type of game, and that is the ground and pound, and you want to kind of force them and limit them as much as possible, force them to kick field goals in the red zone, because coming into this game, it sucks to see. But Washington is in bottom half of the NFL in every statistical category I have written here, except for sacks per game on defense, where they're tied for 11th. They're 26th in red zone conversion percentage, 21st in points per game, 23rd in rushing yards, 26th in passing yards, and 20th in third down percentage. So in this type of game, you don't want to be 26th in the league, right? You want to be top of the league in this type of regard. Against this offense, you have to limit them in the red zone. You got to be able to stop and muddy those things, not allow things to be so easy for them when they get down there. The whole thought process with this team is the bend but don't break. But the last couple of weeks, that their back has been broken a couple of times and no help to these big explosive plays. So if you play correctly, you're able to limit them in that red zone, force some field goals, and help this team be able to fight their way through this tough defense that Seattle has to be able to get you over the top. It's not going to be easy. It's easier said than done, but that's one key way to be able to do that. And so as much as I want to sit here and say it's not going to be a shootout, nobody could predict the future, but it's going to be hard going against Seattle's offense, especially with K9 back there, Zach Charbonnet. They're very well utilized and well equipped to be able to go against our defense and creating some mismatches. All right, now the next question from the Colonel: are you and your co-host taking your kids trick-or-treating tonight? Of course we are. I know that we're about to go to the in-laws here very soon, Colonel, for a night of trick-or-treating around their neighborhood. Very excited for it. I know they are. My son is Captain America. My daughter Corey is going to be, I think, like a cat or something like that. She keeps meowing around the house. But yes, of course, we're going trick-or-treating. They asked me what I'm dressing up as, and I told them I'm being a dad for Halloween. Now, the next question that we have is from our boy Jeff Miles. Is there a player-for-player trade you would make before the deadline? One that doesn't jeopardize our draft picks? Not really. Because the hard part is, Jeff, like, you don't know who's available for other teams, right? And the kind of issue that you would run into is that a player would hear that they're being shopped. Now, if they were to hear that they're being shopped and it doesn't work out, you're in a bad situation because now that player's pissed off. Why are you trying to get rid of me? Kind of thing. In this sort of, I said this on the last pod, Jeff. I don't know if there is a position or player that you could go trade for that would fix the issues that Washington has. It's really hard to be able to pinpoint and to say, oh, if they go get a defensive end, that's going to fix what's happening in the running game. That's going to be able to fix what's happening defensively in the passing game and being able to these explosive plays that happen. There's so many different avenues and so many different fluctuating things that are happening on defense that it's hard to say one move, one player would fix all of that. I think it's hard to say. I don't even think a guy like Myles Garrett could come in and do that for Washington. So it's hard to be able to pinpoint where that would be. I think overall I would stay put, and I would make sure that you're not adding more confusion into this and making things simpler with the attacking kind of style. Coming into this game, Washington is tied for 11th in sacks per game. Those are rookie numbers. We need to pump those numbers up. I don't care what anyone says. Make that your identity on defense. We live by the sword. We die by the sword. We're coming after you. Hell blazing. We're coming right after you every single play with more guys than you can block, and we're going to force that ball out of your hand quickly, and our guys are going to have to come up and make tackles and have sticky coverage. That needs to be, as long as everyone's on the same page in that regard, bring that intensity. That's going to push everything through what you're trying to accomplish and being able to get done. Because even when you sit back in zone and you try to do that prevent type of coverage, things are getting exposed. You're giving up big explosive plays. Well, if you're going to give up big explosive plays anyway, do it going 100,000. Go do it 1,000 miles an hour by getting up to the quarterback if you are going to do it. So that's my personal opinion on the matter. Now the next question from Jeff: besides health, what do you need more of to succeed long term? It's running the football. It's going to be hard in this game. Obviously, Seattle coming into this number 1 in rushing yards allowed on defense. But like that is where this offense derives from. Their best games came from them ripping off big runs, being able to control the line of scrimmage. And that's where Washington the last couple of weeks have kind of lost a little bit. They've been getting run on the outside. Running up the middle is very hard for other teams to do. A lot of credit to Deron Payne and Javon Kinlaw. But ever since Chicago kind of highlighted, you run to the outside, you're able to be successful on us. And that has a lot to do with the DNs, the safeties coming up, missing tackles, outside linebackers, missing tackles at times. But they've seen to clean that up just a little bit. But overall, it's on offense, it's being able to run the football. Especially with our defense, you want to be able to control the clock, the time of possession, allow them to be able to have more time to game plan, to think of things based on what they have just gone through. And for me personally, if you're going to succeed long term, your identity on offense has to be ground and pound. That it doesn't matter what you do, we're going to be able to run the football on you. And it seems ever since, I would say like week 4 or 5, that things have kind of gone off the rails offensively, where they're trying to find their identity. What is their identity? Where do we kind of control this thing? And They have been controlled up until this point. They got to get back to it. And obviously, Jayden helps with that with his legs. Automatically, a defense is fearful of what Jayden can do with the ball in his hands. And so, use that confusion to your advantage. Be able to confuse them using that kind of read option and get the ball to your playmakers as a space and allow them to do something cool. Now, the next question from Tim Towner. I hear a lot of noise about relaxing Joe Witt. Should Cliff Kingsbury also be in that conversation? Heck, should DQ be in there as well? I would say certainly not DQ, but I understand what the whole mindset here is. What happened last year to this year, the contrast, a tougher schedule, and injuries have hit him like a tidal wave. It's hard to rebound from that. I totally get it, dude. And I don't want to make excuses. But at some point, you got to be able to say, you got to stop the bleeding. They know they have to stop the bleeding. But at what point are you going to be able to have those tough conversations to say these are the things that has to get done in order for us to win? And that's hard to do as a coach with these kind of social environments as a coach. You don't want to throw guys under the bus. But overall, when are you going to say these tough conversations have to be put to action in order for Washington to win? And that's the big thing here. Is last year we weren't complaining about the slowness. We weren't complaining about the linebackers. We weren't complaining about the free safety. But things have gone off the rails, and you need to have those tough conversations to be able to overcome it. I know DQ and Cliff Kingsbury, they both have a plentiful amount of excuses to give as to why things have not been as forceful as they need to be. I totally get it. I do. But it's not like they're away from being able to get blame. It's not like they should get some at some point, because just like any player who complains that they're not getting blocked well enough in front of them, RG3, if you're good enough, if you're that good to be able to complain about your blocking, you shouldn't need blocking for you to be successful then. It's just an excuse. Make a play. If you think you're that good, just like in Remember the Titans, what the defensive coordinator said to his guy, he said, if you want to be a superstar, you better give me superstar effort, type of thing. And that's where my mindset here is. If you're going to be a superstar coordinator, if you're going to be a future head coach, you got to give me some effort and be able to make things happen then. You got to get creative. And at this far, they are trying to adjust and do things, but the drops on offense aren't helping. The missed tackles on defense are blowing the doors off of them defensively, and they're giving up explosive plays. And I think on the field, the execution needs to be cleaned up, and obviously crap rolls downhill, right, Tim? And so obviously it's going to start with them, but I trust that they'll be able to get it done. I just think that with Washington, we get back in this comfort zone of complaining about things and wanting changes, and this guy's the worst guy ever, and calm down. Things are off the rails. You got to trust them. This is the same group that did some miraculous things last year. Do give them the benefit. If you do have to make changes in the offseason, do it. But you ride with your horses with what you got. You don't complain about it, because what do you got behind it? You can't really say that there's something behind it better. The next question, this is from Deluxe. I've been begging for a return to running back by committee and utilization of more of the tight ends / running backs in the passing game with injuries to wide receiver. Saw some of that last week. Does it continue? I hope it does. But in this game in particular with Seattle, with them being so good against the run, it's hard to be able to pinpoint to say, can you put C-Rod in there? I know Jeremy McNichols has been awesome in the passing game to help. Maybe that's an avenue that he does get more run in and being able to help you. But then that makes you one-dimensional and saying, all right, Jeremy McNichols is out here. Most likely it's a pass play. So as much as I love the idea of the running back by committee, they have to get unique with it. They have to be able to get those guys in a confusing kind of situation offensively, where they're saying, okay, well, this is most likely a pass play, but then it's that sweep. So I think Debo has a lot to do with that. I think Debo could be utilized just a little bit more in terms of the running game to be able to confuse the defense and make things easier on our young running back in Bill and the offensive line, to be able to spread them out, to be able to hit them up the middle and be able to get some good yardage out of it. But I think the running back by committee is something where you have guys with jobs and you can use that to your benefit. Like if you're in third and short, put C-Rod in the game because you know C-Rod is a power running back. He's added some extra speed, but then you can use stuff off of that. You can say, okay, they're going to say, okay, that's a run play. He's power running back. They're going to run the ball here. Play action rollout. You know what I mean? Like you can use that to your benefit, and we just haven't done that very much thus far. It just seems like everything that we do, they know what we're doing. Next question from Tim Towner. If you had the ability to trade for one wide receiver to match up with Terry and Debo, cost is not an issue. Whom would you like to see us trade for? Oh, that's a good question. Because it ultimately lies on who would be available in order to do that, right? And you have to look at the teams that have a plethora of them. Like a guy like Andre Iosivas from Cincinnati is somebody that has really done well. Or even sticking in Cincinnati, Mitchell Tinsley. Somebody that lit us up in the preseason, showing that probably needs more snaps. But with a star-studded wide receiver room, it's hard to get him more help there. So I would like to go with a more explosive wide receiver in terms of being able to create that separation, that issue deep downfield, because I think that's what ultimately Washington is missing out on just a little bit to be able to help their running game. Because right now defenses are keying in on the box, and it's making things harder on that read option. So if you're able to stretch the field vertically, that creates more space for your running game to kind of work in and have some more space to get some more yardage. So if anyone, I want to be able to hit him deep. And Andre Iosivas, big body guy, but he's a sure catcher of the football and somebody that Joe Burrow loved to target a lot when he was in there. And I think that's somebody that you could go in and take off the hands of somebody else. But I want to go into those type of rooms where there's a lot of wide receivers. Not all of them are getting their snaps, and you could kind of get it for cheap, so to speak. Now, this one from Deluxe. If you had your choice, which cornerback matches up best on Jackson Smith and Jigba? So that's a good question. So here's something from Deluxe. Love hearing irrational and non-emotional takes. Thank you both. Radar says, Sup, Kyle. My question is, what is something about this matchup that worries you? Well, I think it's their offense, to be perfectly honest with you, because they're fourth in sacks per game offensively, Seattle is. So it's hard to get after Darnold to get the ball out of his hands. But they're also eighth in passing yards. They're tied fifth in points per game. They're 10th in red zone conversion percentage, and they're 27th in third down conversion percentage. So what does that tell you? They are 10th. They're tied for fifth in points per game, so they're putting up a lot of points. But in third down conversion percentage, they're 27th. They're one of the worst in the league and be able to convert on third down. What does that tell you? Explosion. So they're going to be able to get those big plays, right? That's what I want to eliminate. I want to eliminate the big plays. That's my biggest concern, and that's what I would like to be able to do. As much as I want to be able to blitz the hell out of them, I want to dedicate another defender over top of Jackson Smith and Jigba. And you can't forget about Cooper Kupp, who's coming in healthy to this game and be able to help them. This is a type of game like a Ladd McConkey type where they're going to do well on you if you match them up on somebody that is not able to contain. So with Seattle in particular, that matchup with Jackson Smith and Jigba is difficult to kind of manage. But like I talked about before, I want to eliminate those big plays. One way you do that is by blitzing heavily, creating a lot of pressure, being able to get the ball out of their hands quickly, but you have to come up, make tackles. That's number frickin' one. You have to tackle well. And that's what worries me about this matchup is that big playability by Seattle and them protecting Sam Darnold. That kind of creates a cog in the issue of saying, how are we going to be able to limit them? But you got to get, I think at this point, Radar, you just got to go after it, dude. And you got to go at 110%, 100 miles an hour, and just say whatever happens, happens. And putting an emphasis on tackling has to be legit in this game and sticky coverage if we're going to be able to do that to kind of help. Because them being 27th third down, if you can create those third down situations, it helps you out a little bit and being able to get off the field. But if you're giving up the big plays, that's the big issue. But I think Sam Darnold is a vet to where if you were to sit in cover 3, you were sitting quarters or cover 4, Tampa 2, that he'd be able to diagnose that, find the holes in the zone, get that ball out to their running backs. And you can't forget about K9, man. It's a good runner right there. It's hard to bring down. And so those are kind of ones that worries me in particular. Now, the next thing said by Deluxe, it's crazy that Dallas defense were all on the screen during the broadcast view. Need to stretch that defense. You're absolutely right, man. I couldn't said it better myself. And Deluxe's question was, if you had your choice, which cornerback matches up best on Jackson Smith and Jigba? I do think it is Trey Amos, just given with Trey Amos, I think a good comparison is what he did against Kyron Lacy last year in college, where Kyron Lacy was really the best wide receiver of that LSU unit, and he did a fantastic job of strapping up with him because Trey Amos is long arms. He does longer arms, very easy for him to make some plays on the football, and that's what really kind of benefits you there. And I would love to be able to see Marshawn Lattimore on Cooper Kupp. I think Cooper Kupp and Marshawn Lattimore is a perfect kind of matchup for those two, and being able to limit him because Marshawn, like getting down deep field, it seems to be kind of the issue against those taller type of long-armed wide receivers. You don't really worry about that with Cooper. With Cooper, it's his route running ability, right? Is be able to, his cuts, to get out of them, to confuse a DB. And Marshawn is very physical. So if you're able to be physical, like we kind of saw that in his pick, right? Where he's playing press on Rashee Rice, gets him stands him up immediately, is with him toe-to-toe, gets his head around, back shoulder throw, is able to bring that in. If he has that kind of physicality going against Cooper Kupp, that's a fantastic matchup for Washington. I think Cooper's going to have a hard time getting off of that. And that's something that Cooper, ever since his first couple years in the NFL, has had a difficulty of being able to do, especially later on in his career. So I think it's a matchup you could really go into and really enjoy, feel confident in if you have Marshawn on Cooper Kupp. Go Trey Amos and Jackson Smith and Jigba, and you tell a dog to go eat full plate of food for you and that kid, and let's see how much you want to eat and how hungry you are, in my personal opinion. Now, the next question that we had submitted, I think that was the last one, actually. Let me see. I'm thinking, Tim Towner says, I'm thinking Brian Thomas Jr. from Jacksonville and JD5 has a great history with from their days at LSU. I've seen that talked about. It's a thought-provoking one, because I kind of talked about that deep field stretching the defense, and that's absolutely what Brian Thomas Jr. does. You can go back to what he did at LSU. You can go back to what he did last year at Jacksonville. Deep downfield, that dude he's electric. He's a big-bodied guy, able to get down there, another eye to kind of, so it would fix the running game issues that teams have to be cognizant of. But I don't think Brian Thomas Jr. is going to be cheap, man. And I don't think that you can do that by sending him any player, right, with Jacksonville. They're kind of younger GM. So it would have to be a draft pick. And which one are you willing to mortgage and separate yourself with? Because we got to think about this isn't just for this year. This is for years to come. And you could sit here and point to say Washington's going to go wide receiver early next year anyway, in next draft. But we don't ultimately know that. Like anything can happen from here to the draft. And I don't want to put all of our eggs into that basket to say it's going to be wide receiver anyway. We're not going to get a Brian Thomas Jr. type in the draft. Might as well go out and get him. If you can guarantee me that, I'm sure Adam Peters has the wherewithal to be able to tell me that. If that's the case, go right ahead. But like I said earlier, I don't think that Washington is really one player away from fixing these issues. I think a lot of them is legitimately just getting back to what you're comfortable with and getting your identity solidified. Obviously, Brian Thomas would help with that just a little bit and being able to run the football. But I think offensively, they need to get things done. And I'm not against the Brian Thomas Jr. if you're able to sell me on what's going to happen in next year's draft. In my personal opinion, I'm not a big guy in trading away draft picks and first rounders. And we've seen this year already that Adam Peters kind of went out and trading draft picks to be able to help with this year. And so far, we haven't seen the flowers bloom from that. And so that kind of is just a concerning thing, pushing your chips all in here. Maybe we need to pull them back a little bit, not and guard them. But if you can sell me on it, I'm all for it. All right, everybody, that's going to wrap us up for this episode. I can't thank you enough for being able to join me here. Thank you to Chase. Thank you to Radar. Thank you to Deluxe, to Tim Towner, Jeff Miles. Deluxe, of course, thank you, brother. Thinking of you. Also thinking of Chris Comerton and his wife and the difficulty that she's having right now. I'm praying for you guys. I hope everything gets better, that you're not in much pain, and praying that you guys will be able to go back to the way things were before. But if you made it this far, you're a freaking champion. I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you to Mitch Tischler for joining us. It's been fantastic. I've had a great week. Prayers were answered for me because this was the first week that I drew up defensive plays for the team I'm helping coach. And I drew up those plays last Sunday and in my coach's office, and we used those, only those plays this week, and we were able to shut out the team 24-0. But it was gratifying because we get there. I'll just a little quick story, but we get there, and this game originally was supposed to be at our place, but it was supposed to be on Thursday, and a big storm was coming on Thursday, and so they had said, we're going to cancel the game, and we said, wait a minute, no, this is an arch rival of ours. This is a team that beat us 50-0 last year. I was not there for that. They ran up the score on them, and it was debilitating for those kids. And we really wanted to play this game. So we said, let's do Friday here. We couldn't. There's a soccer game. Okay. So we said, all right, let's do Wednesday. And the opposing team said, no, we can't do Wednesday at your place, but we can do Wednesday at our place. We said, okay, fine. Even though it was supposed to be a home game for us, we'll go to you guys. So we get there, and we set up all of our stuff on the away sideline, the opposite side of the bleachers. But the head coach comes out, younger guy, probably around my age, screaming, saying, this is a home game for us. It's a home game for us. Y'all got to move. Y'all got to move. And I'm not going to lie to you. I didn't appreciate that. So I started yapping back with him. I started getting into it with him. And I was like, this is supposed to be a home game for us. I don't know why this is a thing for you. And he started pulling up his phone, started showing me that the website said that it was a home game for them. Said, I don't care what it says. It was supposed to be a home game for us. We just moved it because you guys wanted to cancel the game. You didn't even want to play us. So we get into it, and he goes back, and he's still complaining. He calls the athletic director, and the athletic director sides with him. So we said, look, man, we could have lined up on the same sideline. Doesn't matter to us, but fine. This is that big of an issue for you. We'll go to the other side of the field. So I was pissed off going to that game, and I told the boys, I said, I hope you kick their ass today. I don't like this cat one bit. And so I drew up the defensive plays for this. You know, I was seeing red before the game. And we ended up winning 24-0, getting the second win of the season for this team. And it was a very happy moment for me, just being able to, design things in a way, going against a heavy passing attack. And I came in with this cover 3, and I submitted some blitzes that I wanted to come in, and just a regular overall defense and who was going to line up where. And the kids, as cold as it was, and the crappy weather that it was, they were physical. And I said this to the coaching staff, like, good teams are physical in cold weather. And they absolutely were. And so it was a very happy moment for me to be able to see this team get that win and get our first shutout of the season, not allowing a point. That was very gratifying for me. And I thank the Lord that he answered my prayers and were with us that day. Because I say a psalm before every game, and Psalm 144. And I said it with a couple of boys before we started going and praying with them, because I've started praying with them before every game, and the prayers were answered for this one. I'm very happy and thankful, blessed to be able to say that we won on Wednesday against that team, and it was a very happy moment. But just wanted to let that off the chest. I hope you guys have a fantastic Halloween. If you want to submit your score predictions, I think Washington wins. I'm always going to pick them to win. I'm the opposite of Adam Rank, so I think Washington wins 27-26. Last team with the football wins. This time Washington does not fumble it away. They're able to kick the field goal to win off the poor back of Matt Gay. All right, everybody. I appreciate you all. Thank you for making it this far. If there's any recommendations, any tips, love to hear it. Please like and subscribe to the channel. I appreciate you guys. Love you guys. We'll see you again on Monday to be able to break down this game or whatever happens when Washington wins. All right, everybody. Washington football. Woo! What's up, everyone? This is Kyle from the Burgundy Zone. We are releasing our own merch to support the show. If you want to rock the Burgundy Zone logo or you want to see Reed's face on your shirt, we got it. We're starting with t-shirts, hoodies, and zip-up. So if you're a fan of the show, Make sure you snag one before they are gone. Check out the link in our bio on Instagram, or you can find the link in the description of the video.